Welcome to Looking at Lucasfilm, the podcast with a different perspective on the world of Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and all of the other entities that George Lucas, Kathleen Kennedy, and the rest of the team at Lucasfilm have dreamed up over the past 40 years. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and my co-host, the one and only Dan Z, and I are recording this show on Wednesday, February 4th. By the way, folks, I don't know how many of you were following Dan on Twitter. He regularly tweets out some very cool items on his Coffee and Kenobi account. And Dan, I just want to say this past week, I particularly enjoyed that Vanity Fair piece you found about the effects for Rise of Skywalker.
Is that the Bresnikan piece?
I think so. I loved especially the footage of how they worked with the Carrie Fisher stuff from The Force Awakens.
Yes, and incorporated into the Rise of Skywalker. Just, absolutely incredible. Just how could you not win an Oscar for this?
Oh, no, totally. But again, for me, what's fascinating is the choices they made. I mean, they basically kept Carrie's face. So you got the emotion, you got the reality of that performance. But then everything else from what? They changed her hairstyle, her wardrobe, the setting she was in. And you look at the finished footage and you'd never know that this wasn't shot right there on the set.
Right. It's I mean, it really is stunning. I had someone say to me a couple of days ago, they said, I'm really confused, Dan. Wasn't Carrie Fisher, didn't she pass away before this movie? Because it seems like they filmed her stuff already. And because this person didn't know. So I got to tell them about this article and about what the magic that Lucasfilm and ILM produced, and he couldn't believe it. I mean, it really is pretty cool that is the effect it's having on people who don't necessarily follow it as closely as you and I do.
And the other bit out of this that I found just fascinating was the battle on the wreckage of the Death Star between Rey and Kylo Ren. And I mean, in the finished film, it's a stormy sea around them, waves crashing down on them. And you look at where they started, where it's it's a chunk of set, it's a piece of blue screen. And then again, they just walk you through the different layers of how they created this different reality. But again, folks, long story short, if you want to see some really, really cool stuff, you should definitely be signed up for the Coffee with Kenobi Twitter feed.
I appreciate that. And though that article, Lisa Dullard posted, she does a ton of social media scheduling and promotions for me on Coffee with Kenobi on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So all props to her for that.
Oh, very cool. Okay, and while we're talking about Carrie Fisher, I spent the last week or two reading two books about this late Star Wars fan favorite. There's Carrie Fisher, A Life on the Edge by Sheila Weller, and then there's Carrie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds, which is written by Darwin Porter and Danforth Prince. And what's kind of intriguing about these two books is they both talk about how Carrie Fisher was not, in fact, George Lucas's first choice of Princess Leia, that Jodie Foster was. And I guess the issue was that when George was casting, Jodie was still under contract for two more pictures at Disney, and they wouldn't release her from the contract. So Carrie kind of got the role by default. And what's especially interesting is in the Carrie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds is this moment where he describes it's 1973. Debbie Reynolds is on Broadway, appearing in a revival of Irene, and her old co-star James Garner comes to visit her at the theater, and the two of them start talking about their careers. And the quote that I thought would interest looking at Lucasfilm fans is that here's Garner talking with Reynolds about, I've done pictures that I'm ashamed of, and this latest one for Disney is One Little Indian is one of the duds. The only bright spot of the whole movie is my 10-year-old co-star Jodie Foster. Okay, so Jodie Foster was born in November of 1962. One Little Indian shoots in the fall of 72. So Garner's story about her being 10 years old checks out. Okay, so we jump ahead to August of 1975 when George is casting Star Wars. And okay, help me with the math here, Dan. That means that Jodie Foster would have been almost 13 at the time.
That's probably right. I mean, you are talking to an English teacher, but that sounds about right.
Okay, so and now on the other hand, Carrie Fisher is born October 56, and when she wins the role by default, she's 18. So if you think about it, if Disney had actually released her, this would have been a 13 or 14-year-old Princess Leia, which would have really changed the film, don't you think? Or...
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know how, if she looked older than she was at that time, but yeah, it would have been a whole different dynamic, and I don't think they could have realistically had there'd be any kind of chemistry with her and Harrison Ford, because he's already, what was he? How much older is he than Carrie Fisher?
Well,
was he 12 years older than Carrie Fisher?
He's born July 1942. So when auditioned, he was 33 to her 18 years old. So
right. So gosh, wouldn't have worked.
Well, but the other interesting thing here is that Jodie was not the only Disney contract player that George brought in to read for roles in Star Wars. In fact, you can go online right now, head over to YouTube, and you can see a 6-minute long piece of footage of Kurt Russell's audition for Han Solo, and he was 24 at the time. So, I don't need to explain to you, Dan, that George really did kind of mix things up when he was doing the auditions, just trying out different pairings, trying out, actors of different ages and that sort of thing. But, that, and I think as we were pre-gaming, when I mentioned Kurt Russell, it's like, don't get me wrong, you like Kurt Russell, but he just doesn't have the swagger that Harrison Ford does.
It's not the same. I mean, he obviously he has a similar sort of an archetype about him, if that's even a thing, but it's not the same kind of gravitas, I guess. I mean, he's got the grit, but not the gravitas that Harrison does.
Well, speaking of, again, thinking of, actors, different actors in different parts. And face it, you and I both enjoyed the gentleman who played, the title role in Solo.
Alden Ehrenreich. Yes.
Yeah, I thought, he actually did a pretty good job of sort of, channeling a proto, Harrison Ford.
Agreed. I think he's wonderful. A bright spot.
Yeah, and let's face it, when they were talking about doing the prequels, and it's the notion of we were going to get to see a younger Obi-Wan, and it's like, who the hell is going to pick up, where Alec Guinness left off? But Ewan McGregor did an amazing job. I think, he's one of the strongest pieces of the prequels.
Oh, I agree.
And speaking again of Ewan and his performance of Obi-Wan, now we've been following the Obi-Wan limited series for Disney Plus. In fact, on the last show that Dan and I recorded, we shared the rumor that this limited series from Lucasfilm that's eventually going to air on Disney's new subscription service, production suddenly shut down, or rather pre-production suddenly shut down last week or thereabouts at Pinewood. And supposedly crew got sent home, and it's like, so everyone kind of got concerned about this. And the interesting thing is, just today, Ewan McGregor was on Good Morning America, and he was there to promote Birds of Prey, which Warner Brothers is releasing to theaters this coming Friday. And over the course of the interview, Michael Strahan, asked him flat out, so what's going on with the Obi-Wan series? And, what, what Ewan basically said was that, we're going to start shooting after the first of the year, and as in the first of the year in 2021, that they have a bunch of scripts that he's read that he really liked, but they're in the process of rewriting them to make them that much better. And again, what's kind of interesting about this is the Hollywood Reporter and Collider have also done some work on this story. And I don't know how much of this you've heard, Dan, but basically, evidently, the problem that they were having with Obi-Wan now is directly related to The Mandalorian.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Think about it. The Mandalorian is basically about, this crusty warrior who, almost begrudgingly becomes, the guardian of the child. And, and it's, you face it debuted in November of last year. It became this huge pop culture phenomenon. In fact, it was the big piece of news that just came out of the Disney quarterly earnings call that we finally now know when season 2 of this thing is going to begin. That's October of this year. Am I remembering that correctly?
That sounds right to me. Yes, because I've already got the countdown on my my daily post-it notes.
All right. Well, and the other thing that's worth noting here is Iger basically talked about the fact that what they want to do with season 2 of The Mandalorian is sort of load it up with characters that potentially could step away and have their own shows. And what I've heard repeatedly coming out of Lucasfilm and Disney is I apologize, I'm blanking her name, but the
Cara
female.
Dune.
There we go.
Played by Gina Carano.
Yeah, that evidently she's already considered the breakout character for Mandalorian, and that they are, looking as part of season 2 to sort of create her own story arc and allow her to step away and have her own show.
Wow. As long as it doesn't take away from the chemistry of the Mandalorian, because yes, I think that'd be cool for her to have her own spin-off show, but I hope that doesn't take away from her time on the Mandalorian itself, because they've really got something pretty cool with the connection of that core.
I totally agree. But here's the interesting thing so the first set of scripts that were written for the Obi-Wan series supposedly dealt with, again, if we remember the end of, Revenge of the Sith, that Obi-Wan, delivers, Luke to Lars and Aunt Beru.
Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, yeah.
There we go. And then he sort of disappears into the wastelands of Tatooine and, roughly stays in hiding for the next 16 years till Luke seeks him out.
19, actually.
19 years? He's 19 years old? Wow.
Well, it's 19 years between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope.
Wow. Okay. Okay, so supposedly the original story for the Obi-Wan limited series for Disney Plus was that some incident occurs that forces Obi-Wan to sort of come out of hiding and go check on the toddler versions of Luke and Leia. And the weird part of it is that everyone was happy with the storyline until The Mandalorian debuted. And then suddenly it's like, wait a minute, this, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, Dan, that, from a Star Wars mythology point of view, it would make sense that would be where you'd take the Obi-Wan story, right? That he'd be checking on, in fact, was it Star Wars Rebels where they actually had that moment on Tatooine after, what is it?
In the episode Twin Sons, when Maul and Obi-Wan face off for the final time, at the very, very end, they show Luke kind of running into his home on Tatooine, but that's as close as it gets. There's a couple of comic books in the Jason Aaron series that started in 2015, where Obi-Wan would help Luke as a teenager, like a young teenager, and he would have these kind of headbutting matches with Uncle Owen, but he and Luke never actually crossed paths. And that is canonical. But so there's a couple of them.
Well, so again, it makes sense from a story point of view that this would be the route, but that they'd go that again, Obi-Wan checking in on toddler Luke, toddler Leia, but now in the wake of the Mandalorian, where again we now have this clan of two, the child and Mando. Suddenly that story idea seems kind of derivative, as in, oh, it's the Mandalorian all over again. And it's like, no, this has been part of the Star Wars story, the Skywalker saga for years, right?
Yeah. But that can't be right that he would check on Leia on Alderaan too, because that would mean he would leave his post on Tatooine.
Well, I'm only telling you what I've heard from friends at Disney and Lucasfilm, and more to the point, this is why the scripts are being rewritten. Interesting thing is they're creeping in the number of episodes supposedly from 6 to 4, but keeping the exact same budget, so it will be that much more cinematic. They can do that much bigger set pieces, and the interesting thing is. Again, Ewan is still very, very, very much on board. I'm sure it's probably disappointing that production got pushed off from the middle of this year to the beginning of next year. But as part of the interview today, he talked about, Strahan said, "Is it going to be tough to get back into that mindset?" I mean, in fact, Ewan talked about. I think the last time I made a Star Wars movie was 2003, and it's like. Is it going to be easy to get back into the mindset? He says, I don't think it'll take 2 minutes. I'll put on the cloak and I'll be there. So, so again, all right. So the good news is, it's still coming. It's still happening. Downside is not shooting till, January of 2021. So, maybe the latter part of 2021, more likely early part of 2022. Right. But evidently Deborah Chow is still on board as showrunner. And she directed 2 of the better received episodes of The Mandalorian, Chapter 3, The Sin, and Chapter 7, The Reckoning. And speaking of Ms. Chow, Kathleen Kennedy was on the red carpet this past Sunday night at London's Royal Albert Hall. She was in town for the British Academy Film Awards. And while she was, sort of doing the walking down the carpet, dealing with reporters, that sort of thing, she got asked by someone from the Hollywood Reporter about whether we were ever going to see a woman direct a Star Wars film for theatrical release. And, Kathleen started out by pointing out that Deborah, along with Bryce Dallas Howard, had already directed episodes of The Mandalorian, and then went on to say that we've got 2 or 3 fantastic women working with Star Wars. We're cultivating a lot of great talent. And, as to why there hasn't been a female director of a theatrical Star Wars film yet. She flat out said, "Look, we want to be sure that when we bring in a female director to do Star Wars, they're set up to succeed. The Star Wars movies are gigantic films, and you just can't come in without essentially no experience." So, in a weird sort of way, at least the way Kathleen views the situation, that the Mandalorian and, Obi-Wan are almost kind of the farm team, for lack of a better term.
Interesting. I like that analogy. Yeah, I can see that.
So long story short, folks, it's not if a woman will ever get to direct a Star Wars film for theatrical release, it's a when. Right. And speaking of when things might happen, Kathleen also, while she was on the red carpet for the the British Film Academy Awards, got asked about Indiana Jones 5. And this kind of concerned me, Dan. What she said is that we're working away at getting a script. They are getting the script where we want it to be, and then we'll be ready to go. Harrison will be involved. It's not a reboot. It's a continuation, and he can't wait.
Yeah, I can't wait for him to do it either. I mean, gosh, I just don't know why. How long does it take to make a script? It's like they're reworking the entire Bible. And they've been working on a script for years, haven't they?
Well, here's the thing. Here's what I just heard from our friend at Disney, and it's a weird kind of complication. Basically, you must have seen the trailer that's out there now for the Jungle Cruise, the Dwayne Johnson, Emily Blunt film.
Yeah, and plus I saw a lot of footage of it at D23.
Okay, all right. Evidently, it's coming out this summer. In fact, what's kind of concerning is it's coming out July 24th, 2020. And Indiana Jones 5 already has a locked-in release date of July 9th, 2021. So basically a year apart, give or take 2 weeks. And evidently Jungle Cruise, the movie, has turned out really, really, really well. In fact, there's a lot of talk at Disney that this may be the film franchise to replace Pirates of the Caribbean, which kind of petered out in 2017 with the 5th installment, Dead Men Tell No Tales. But the problem is that Indiana Jones 5 and the Jungle Cruise movie share an aesthetic, share some settings, and there's just kind of a concern that next to Emily Blunt and Dwayne Johnson, kind of at the top of their form, bringing in Harrison Ford, who again, born in 1942. The concern is that, that just even with Steven Spielberg doing his masterful direction, this may look kind of dated. So evidently that's why the script now, and remember that this thing is supposed to start shooting in April in London. So, the fact is that, these rewrites are kind of being done to the effect of, okay, we want this particularly sitting alongside of the Jungle Cruise to really look good. We'll know more, Dan, in the coming week, because Harrison Ford is going to start making the rounds of the morning talk shows and late night shows like Kimmel and Fallon, because he's going to be out talking up Call of the Wild, which Disney is releasing to theaters on February 21st. So hopefully he'll be a little bit more on the record about what's going on with the film, if they are in fact starting in April, because face it, if they start shooting on April 1st, there are still only 15 months to deliver a finished film.
That seems too optimistic considering how slow things are moving.
Yeah, so
I mean, I really want it to happen. I couldn't want it anymore. It's my very favorite. But gosh, I mean, the irony is that they're worried about it's going to feel dated, but he's not going to get any younger. I mean, nobody is, but
No, you can't sit the way back. So speaking of stuff, February 21st, on that very same day, over on Disney Plus, the first new episodes of season 7 of Star Wars: The Clone Wars begin airing, and it's been 6 years now since we last got a new episode of the show. Is there anything in particular that you're looking forward to, Dan, other than, of course, the return of Ahsoka Tano?
Right. Well, we talked about this a little bit last episode, but what I will say is that I'm looking forward to an expansion of more of Anakin and Obi-Wan's story, because this will be right before the big turn that changes Anakin from the light side to the dark side and Darth Vader. So the fact that it's going to be apparently running concurrently with Revenge of the Sith is great. I've always thought it would be really cool to see how Palpatine is captured canonically, because it's never happened. We've seen it in Labyrinth of Evil by Matthew Stover in the book. We've seen it in the Tartakovsky animated shorts, and those were both great spins on that, but we've never seen the canonical version. So I want to see how Dave Filoni would tell that story. That honestly might be my number one thing, because it leads immediately into Revenge of the Sith. In fact, if they leave Coruscant and race to find the Chancellor on Grievous's Star Cruiser, and that's how the Clone Wars ends, to me, that would be perfection.
Yeah, okay. That's a good answer. Looking forward to this myself. And speaking of the way shows end, Sunday, January 26th, we had the last 2 episodes of Star Wars Resistance air on the Disney Channel. And I know you were behind the last time we talked, Dan. Any chance you got to catch up a little bit on this Lucasfilm animation show, or?
Yeah, and I thought it was very satisfying. I liked the show. It certainly kind of flew under the radar compared to Rebels and Clone Wars, but I like the tie-ins. I like, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of stuff online of how some of these vehicles show up at the end of the Rise of Skywalker, and I just thought it was really fun. I hope that people give it a chance. The fact that season 2 will be out on Disney Plus at the end of the month, I think will certainly help that happen. But yeah, it was great fun.
Okay. And you were happy with the way things wrapped up? I mean, face it, it was always more of a kid's show. And so that, Tam, and again, I apologize for spoilers for folks who haven't necessarily seen the show, but, Tam had second thoughts about the First Order and, reached out to her friends on the Colossus. Were you happy with the way it wrapped, or?
Yeah, that was cool. I like to think, again, I thought it was a nice sort of a way to sort of tie things in, give you a little bit of suspense and intrigue, just the right amount of that. And it was a little frustrating too, because that's part of the challenge of building suspense as well, but frustrating in a good storytelling way.
Okay.
What about you?
I again, I thought, if I have a criticism now, and in fact, it's kind of weird because, again, I will admit on previous podcasts, I've been kind of hard on this show, but, especially the last couple of episodes, you just got the sense that they were running for the curtain, that they were telling, stories that perhaps, would have spun out more leisurely as part of season 3. We're being told, in the final moments of season 2. And I guess, there's that old show business adage, always leave them wanting more. And that was, I guess, the way the show ended. It's like, oh, it's over. I was really getting into this. So,
yeah, I agree.
So, by the way, at the top of the show, we were talking about, all the cool stuff that Dan tweets out, but there are other folks who tweet out interesting stuff. And did you see the tweet today from Abbey Road Studios?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Well, it turns out this is what they tweeted out. This week in 1999, recording began for the score of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Wow. Composed and conducted by John Williams and performed by the London Symphony Orchestra. This was the first Star Wars score that Williams had composed in over 16 years. And it's worth seeking out because this tweet was also accompanied by a video. And I'm blanking the name of the scene in the film, but it's the epic the lightsaber battle between Obi-Wan and Darth Maul, and with that amazing
Duel of the Fates, yeah.
Amazing choral piece, that goes with it. So they show the actual chorus there in the building, sing along with the orchestra. And I bring this up because just last week, again, he directs his first Star Wars in 16 years back to 1999. Just last week, John Williams picked up his 25th Grammy Award, and it was a Star Wars-related win. Oddly enough, not for the score for Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, but rather for the area music that Williams composed for Black Spire Outpost at Disneyland Park at Disney's Hollywood Studios. To be specific, Dan, what John took home was the Grammy for Best Instrumental Composition. And the composition he won for was entitled Star Wars Galaxy's Edge Symphonic Suite, which, by the way, if you want to hear this, is this 4-minute and 57 long composition that evidently Imagineering had him write for the land. It's actually available for purchase on iTunes right now. Are you you familiar with this piece at all, Dan? Or
I love it so much. I think it's an absolutely perfect blend of Star Wars and theme park music.
Mm-hmm.
It's just atmospheric. It's inspiring. It does play during Smuggler's Run.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it. I was so happy to see him get recognition for that, because I think it's a beautiful piece. And on Spotify, on their Star Wars playlist, it's one of the songs that's in there. So when I'm doing things around the house or at events, I have that kind of playing in the background, and whenever that comes up, I just can't help but smile.
Wow. Okay. I will tell you what, folks. We'll pause here for a moment. So for those of you who want to go over to iTunes and chase down Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, the Symphonic Suite, and when Dan and I get back, we're going to share a Star Wars related story that's maybe not as sweet.
This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Psst, healthcare pros, word's out, and it's too good to keep quiet. Look, LinkedIn is revolutionizing job hunting, making it possible to search by specialty, shift preference, and salary. Endless scrolling is out. Whether it's a mental health therapist or dental hygienist, finding the perfect role is faster and easier than ever. Head to linkedin.com/healthcare and start your search today.
A message from McAfee. Wondering why the post office is texting you, or why you owe thousands of dollars in toll fees? Because someone's trying to scam you. The good news? McAfee can help. With McAfee's award-winning scam detection, it's easy to tell what's real and what's fake over text, in your inbox, and online. If they're
You want a free gift?
Seriously? If they're faking it, they're not making it past us. Get award-winning scam detection today. McAfee.com/keepitreal.
We're back, and on previous shows, Dan, you've talked about all the Star Wars related books you regularly receive. Is what are you reading now?
There's a couple of fun ones that Mason and I read. There's a great one that came out late in December called Star Wars: The Galaxy Needs You by Caitlin Kennedy, and it's got Rey on the front holding up the lightsaber with BB-8, and it's very much kind of a feel-good piece with a lot of wonderful aphorisms in it that is just absolutely inspiring and great for children. But then the one that I just got is also by Caitlin Kennedy with art by Brian Kessinger, and it's called Star Wars R2-D2 is Lost. The majority of it takes place on Endor. The art is great. It very much feels like a Calvin and Hobbes book. It's fun. The other day I was driving and my son was in the back seat, and he read it aloud to me, and he's 6 years old. And it was wonderful to hear it from his sweet voice, of course, but just, the fun, and they kind of retell the story of Return of the Jedi, and they put in some new stuff, and it's really pretty charming.
Wow, I'll have to seek that out.
So we're not talking like it's not a heavy novel, but it's just fun.
Oh no! Again, I enjoy Star Wars and all of the flavors it comes in. More to the point, I enjoy finding Star Wars related stories in weird places. In a book I read back over the holidays, Life Isn't Everything, Mike Nichols remembered by 150 of his closest friends. This Henry Holt and Company published this back in November of 2019. And for those of you who are too young to know who Mike Nichols is, he was half of the groundbreaking comedy team Nichols and May. He was the guy who directed the original Broadway production of Neil Simon's The Odd Couple. He also directed the movie version of The Graduate. He was the guy who helped turn Eric Idle turn Monty Python and the Holy Grail into the long-running musical Spamalot. From 1998 till his death in November of 2014, he was happily married to ABC News anchor and Disney legend Diane Sawyer. Long story short, true legend in entertainment circles. Virtually everything he worked on became an enormous success, which is why everybody wanted to work with Mike Nichols. Which brings us to Chapter 8 of Life Isn't Everything, which is entitled "We Must Work Together." And Dan, this chapter starts out with an anecdote by Tony Walton, who is the Tony and Emmy award-winning designer that most Disney fans will know from his work on the original Mary Poppins, which was released in theater August of 1964. Anyway, this story starts in the fall of 1976, which is when Nichols, having seen an out-of-town tryout of the musical version of Annie, which started out life at the Goodsfield Opera House in East Hampstead, Connecticut, he decided he wanted to bring the show to Broadway. But for the Broadway version of Annie, Mike wanted bigger and better sets than the ones he saw at the Goodspeed Opera House, which is why he reaches out to Walton, who's no slouch when it comes to Broadway shows. Over the 4 years previous to this, Tony had worked with Bob Fosse on his 2 hit shows, Pippin, which opened on Broadway in October of 72, and then Chicago, which opened in June of 75. So what Nichols was hoping was that Walton could bring this extra layer of showbiz pizzazz to Annie, which would then improve the show's chances of succeeding on Broadway. But Tony, based on what he's seen at the Goodspeed Opera House, he wasn't sure that this musical, which was based on a comic strip that used to be popular back in the 30s, had what it took to win over a modern day audience on the Great White Way. So this is the story that I wanted to share with you, Dan, that this is a story that Tony tells in Life Isn't Everything. So, all right, Mike invited me to design Annie when it was about to come to Broadway. I had seen it and said, Mike, why do you think it's going to work? And he just said, trust me, if we get it right, it'll be your annuity. And Walton goes on to say, I had a similar experience with George Lucas. He offered me Star Wars. George asked me if I would do it. And I said, I'm not really interested in futuristic things. I added that if all of these high-tech wonders were rusting and falling to bits, I'd find that in some way appealing to get on board. And Walton goes on, and the cheeky bugger, he actually ended up using that idea. And he closes out the story. After the success of Annie, Mike never tormented me about it, but George did every time I saw it. So, I guess for me, the notion is that, and think about this, to be fair, when George reached out to Walton, this would have been February of 1975 when 20th Century Fox had finally given George $5 million to go off and shoot the Star Wars From the Adventures of Luke Starkiller. He was just coming off of working on Murder on the Orient Express. And, this film came out in theaters in November of 1974. It was this huge hit for Paramount. And Walton wound up being nominated for Academy Awards for Best Costume Design. He ends up losing to The Great Gatsby. But somewhere between February of 75, when George Lucas gets that $5 million from Fox, and April 4th, which is when the Academy Awards are happening. He's potentially going to win an award for his work on the Orient Express. So Lucas is supposedly talking with Walton about how he wants to shoot this thing on location in places like Tunisia. Whereas Sidney Lumet, the guy he just worked with on Murder of the Orient Express, is also wooing Walton, that he's offering the opportunity to work on his next film, which will be a movie version of Equus, which is going to be shot up in Canada in December of 1976. And so to Tony's way of thinking, let's see, I could go to the desert of Tunisia. I could be the art director on this sci-fi movie and this brutally hot, environment, or I could shoot in Canada, which is close to my friends and family. And so that's it. He turns down the job basically because it's like, I'd like to be closer to home and I'd like to not have to travel to extreme environments to shoot this movie. And you got to feel for the poor slob, because spring of 77, inside of 1 5-week period, Dan, Annie opens on Broadway and becomes this smash hit. And then just a few weeks later, Star Wars opens and becomes the top grossing film of all time. And to add insult to injury, Equus comes out in October of that same year and seriously underperforms the box office. I mean, mind you, it gets a couple of Academy Award nominations, but it just, it doesn't do anything. And so, don't get me wrong, it all worked out career-wise. mind you, Tony still had to go to the, watch the Academy Awards, where Equus didn't pick up a single award that year, whereas Star Wars took home 6 Oscars, including one for Best Art Direction, which Norman Reynolds, was very happy to accept. Long story short, Tony went on to have much professional, recognition and personal success beyond this point. He won an Academy Award himself in April of 1980 for his work on Bob Fosse's All That Jazz. He took up a Tony in 1992 for the revival of Guys and Dolls, and he even, landed an Emmy for art direction on Death of a Salesman. But you have to wonder how Walton felt back in the spring of '77 when these 2 projects he said no to, the original Broadway production of Annie and Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, came out and were these cultural phenomena. And that's the interesting thing is when you talk with filmmakers, they always talk about the one that got away. So
isn't it crazy? I mean, there's probably so many folks in Hollywood around that time. And of course, we know about stuff with Disney too, and no one really knew. And sometimes I wonder if part of the reason of the success of Star Wars was because it was so original and surprising, and people were not expecting it at all. I mean, I think today's modern audiences who fall in love with the prequels and the newer stuff and the Mandalorian just have no idea of how a lot of incredibly talented, savvy people with a lot of clout didn't think it was going to work out and didn't bother to put their hats in the ring. Okay. And here we are now.
Yeah. And it's worth noting that another film that ILM had a big hand in its success, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I don't know if Eddie Murphy was making the rounds, earlier this year promoting Black Dynamite. And during one of his sit downs, he was talking, is there a film that you turned down that you regret? And he said, oh my God, yes. And it was Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And he just talked about the fact that, he read the script and it's like, how the hell are they going to do this? How are they going to put a live actor next to an animated character and make it believable? And of course it was, the guys at ILM who did all of the amazing shading and shadow on top of all of the amazing animation that Richard Williams and his team did that made the two of them mesh. But Eddie, to this day, regrets that he didn't climb on board when, Steven Spielberg came a-calling and I got Robert Zemeckis and I got, George Lucas and ILM on board to do the effects. And it's like, I don't understand how you're going to do this. And he said no. So yeah, I mean, this is a more common story than you might think. So, anyway, but again, if you enjoy great stories, folks, you really, really, really need to seek out Coffee with Kenobi, Dan's podcast. Have you got anything interesting coming in the pipeline, or?
Well, we finally finished reviewing The Mandalorian, and the last few weeks we've been looking a little bit more closely at The Rise of Skywalker, because the dust has settled and it's been out. It's not even really in theaters anymore, except for a few select places. Mm-hmm. So there's still a couple of key points from the film that still haven't really quite set well with me, and I talked to other people about that as well. And then, of course, we're also getting ready for the return of the Clone Wars, like we mentioned at the top of the show, kind of taking a look back, talking about what we're looking the most forward to. It's going to be a ton of fun. And, of course, if you really like hearing the dulcet tones of my voice, you can go to our Patreon page. We have a weekly show called CWK Pour-Over, where we look at Star Wars and other popular culture topics, do some behind-the-scenes stuff as well. It's been really, really fun. It's been fun. And plus, if you are someone who is thinking about starting up a podcast or a blog, or you have a brand and you want help expanding it, you can certainly go to danzmedia.com and we can set something up.
Very cool. Over at Jim Hill Media, we get a pile of podcasts as well. We got, of course, the one that started it all, Disney Dish with Len Testa. We have Fine Tuning with Dan's good, close personal friend, Drew Taylor.
That's right. I was nice from on this show.
We almost got through one. Dang.
Yeah, almost.
Okay. We have Universal Joint with Dustin Fuse. We have I Want That with Michelle Valladolid. We also have the marvelous Disney podcast with Aaron Adams, the gentleman who edits a lot of the shows here. And tell you what, folks, if you like what Dan and I do, if you could do us both a favor and head over to iTunes and rate and recommend not only Coffee with Kenobi, but also looking at Lucasfilm. That, of course, helps us get additional ears and eyeballs. On the other hand, if you really like what we do, get over to Bandcamp and subscribe. That's very helpful. And of course, we talked a little bit about the social media aspect of the show. Like I said, you really want, make sure to seek out the stuff that Dan is having posted on Twitter, because there's a lot of cool material there. Likewise, for Jim Hill Media, we're on Twitter and Instagram and over on Facebook as Jim Hill Media News. And I guess Dan and I look forward to seeing you there, and we'll be back with the new Looking at Lucasfilm shortly. Till then, thanks for listening.